Hi everyone, this is Miss Long, and I am making a recording to cover lessons 11 through 14 of Unit 3. That is for the week of September 10th through 14th, since I will be out all week. And so you can feel free to review the lessons and then pause after each individual lesson ends for the day. So all of the lessons will be in this video. Now before we get started, just remember that you should be working in both of your books this week, student guide and textbook, as you see on the screen. Make sure you do the appropriate pages for each book. Remember, if you look into the student guide, it will tell you what pages to read in the textbook. And again, this week I will be out for testing in Prattville and Mobile. I hope to see you there. You will still have a lesson due each day, and that's why I'm making this recording, to give you some extra help on those lessons. Now, if you need me, I will respond to your emails, but it will be after testing each day, so it just may be a little delayed, but I will respond to your emails each day. And just remember that we are working this week to prepare for a test next week. So next week you will see your Unit 3 test. I just want to warn you, please do not complete the test until you've completed the study guide and until you've come to one of the review classes next week. So make sure you do not complete that test before you have prepared for it using the study guide and your textbooks. So just a little note on the study guide. I will send you a copy of the study guide this week, but just a warning, please do not use the internet to complete the study guide. If you do use the internet, you are going to get some crazy answers that will not help you prepare for the test. So just a warning in advance, you should only use your textbook to complete that study guide, and the pages that you'll use are on the screen. That is what's going to help prepare you for the test the best. So just a warning on that. Now first we're going to start talking about Lesson 11 of Unit 3, and that is the lesson on Sargon, who is a mighty ruler in these ancient civilizations. Now at this time we've discussed Sumer, and we've just talked about how this town here, or this civilization, Sumer, started to decline. So it was very prominent, very important for several millennium, and then eventually, because of salinization, or poor soil, and because of wars, it started to decline. Well, one of those warring neighbors was a civilization called Akkad, and as you can see, Akkad is here on the screen. It is still in Mesopotamia, but it's just in a different area and a different civilization. So just a little further northwest of Sumer. Well, Akkad decided that they wanted to build an army, and they were led by a man named Sargon. Now, Sargon called himself Sargon the Mighty, King of Akkad, and he organized the Akkadians who lived in Akkad into a strong army, and he appointed himself as their leader and as their king. Now what he did is he began taking over city-states. So if we go back to this map, you'll see that there are these different dots, different city-states. He basically just kind of one at a time invaded them, took them over, and basically appointed himself as the king of that city-state. And that's how he gained land. So he began in northern Mesopotamia, into areas of like northern Syria, northern or southeastern Turkey, which are present-day countries, and eventually he starts moving south and into Sumer and takes over Sumer. Now, as he collected these different city-states, he organized them under one leader, and that was him. And so basically he reorganized Mesopotamia. He created one area of land that was combined and ruled by one person, rather than being ruled by different governments as the city-states were in the past. So what he ended up doing was he created the first empire, because an empire is what we call a collection of states or a collection of countries or towns under one single ruler. So he was the creator of the first empire, and he was himself the first real emperor. And because of his ruling style, because of his success, he was looked up to a lot by other emperors, because he was able to build such a large empire. He was able to get the city-states to pay him money and pay him in goods because he was the leader. And because he combined so many different city-states across a large amount of land, and so many different cultures, he created a system where basically these cultures, they rubbed off on one another. So they began kind of sharing cultural practices and things like that. So for example, the Akkadians actually began using cuneiform, which was the Sumerian writing style, and they started worshiping some Sumerian gods. So they shared these cultural practices. Now Sargon also, in his time, he created a permanent army that he could use whenever he needed to invade new city-states or to suppress anybody who wanted to fight back. He also appointed governors and placed them in certain city-states to rule, but then ultimately he was the one who told the governors what to do, and then the governors did what he said. And then he also built a very large and beautiful capital city to be the capital of his empire. So as we look at these two maps, we can kind of see the effect of Sargon's rule. So starting out when he first got started with his, empire building, these were the different empires and states and city-states that you may have seen in this area of land. So you can see there are more than one. But once he really kind of gets to his height where he has gained all of this land and gained all of this power from taking in these city-states, we see now this is the Empire of Sargon. So quite a lot of land, especially in Mesopotamia. He ruled very well, and he was able to create this large empire. Now, of course, with that is going to come a lot of fighting. So in his time, he did fight in more than 30 wars in his 56-year rule, which is a ton of wars. And the reason being because not only did he have to take over these city-states, he had to continuously fight against them to keep them suppressed, because of course you've got this large empire, you've got a lot of different city-states, and if you're not treating them well, and in many cases the city-states were not being treated well, then they are going to fight back. So he constantly had to fight in wars just to keep the city-states kind of under his control. But he did rule for 56 years, and he died of natural causes, which is pretty impressive. Just in the case of him being in so many wars, it's kind of impressive that he did not pass away from war injuries. So he actually ruled for 56 years, passed away naturally, and as he passed away, he did pass down his empire to his descendants, so his sons and his grandsons. Now, after a few years, his grandson, who was the ruler at the time, he did die, and because of that, the ruling party was very unstable. There was nobody to take control, and so it was very easy for other armies in other empires or areas to kind of come in, defeat Sargon's, last remaining empire, and basically caused the end of the empire. So the city-states broke up, there was no one ruler anymore, and everybody kind of went their own way. Now, wars did continue to rage on because certain people wanted to be in control, but none of them were very successful in that. But one man did become successful eventually, and his name was Hammurabi. He was the king of Babylon in the 18th century BC, and we're going to talk more about him in the next lesson. So that is all for 3.11. So you can pause here, do your 3.11 lesson, and tomorrow you can come back and work on 3.12. Now 3.12 is regarding Hammurabi's code. We're going to talk about a guy that came on the scene at this time after the Empire of Sargon fell, and his name is Hammurabi. Now Hammurabi was from Babylon, and he was a Babylonian king. Now if you take a look at this map, you see this is Mesopotamia. Here's the Euphrates River, here's the Tigris River, there's Sumer and Akkad. So there's where those ancient civilizations came from. But right here on the Euphrates River, there was a city-state, very large, called Babylon. And this is the city-state, this is the area that Hammurabi took over. Now under his rule, Babylon was very peaceful for many years, and he improved the city-state a lot. And he actually made it the capital of his empire because he was able to kind of invade these areas and take over this land that's in purple on the map. And then Babylon he created he made to be the capital of his empire. Now here are some of the accomplishments of him. He did take an interest in day-to-day affairs. He wasn't just like on his throne and not caring about the little people. He did take an interest in how the empire worked and how it could work better. He sent soldiers to live among his conquered city-states. He assigned officials to rule for him, kind of like Sargon did by assigning the governors. He basically gave orders to some people, and those people were going into the city-states and basically making his orders be followed. He also appointed tax collectors to raise money, and he built many temples and canals, and canals along the Euphrates River to benefit them in trade and in transportation and communication with other countries and other empires. But the most important thing that we get from Hammurabi is the Code of Hammurabi, which is something that is still in use today, is still studied today, and it's still very influential in our present day lives. Now, the Code of Hammurabi was actually a collection of 282 laws, and he based his laws on old Sumerian and Akkadian laws, but he just kind of tweaked them a little bit. And in these laws, he made it very clear what the rules were and what the punishment was if you did not follow the rules. Now, he did this because he was operating under the idea that he wanted to make sure the strong people would not oppress the weak people. And from this, basically we're kind of thinking about, in this conquered land, you got these different city-states, and we didn't want it or he didn't want it to be a system of where one city-state thought they were better than another. He wanted to make sure that everybody understood that you are all one empire, you are all the same, nobody's strong, nobody is weak, everybody is going to be equal under the law. Now, of course, when we say everybody's equal under the law, that does not apply to low classes and slaves and even women. So that is the only difference. But still, this was a system in which he established, laws and punishments that were very clear for his empire. Okay, so consider that, it may or may not be fair that some people were not treated as well as others, but just think about, do you think that matching the punishment to the crime is a fair system of justice? Okay, so that's what we can consider as you learn more about Hammurabi's codes. Now, again, like we said, it was important because people in all parts of the empire, regardless of where you lived, followed the same law. And that was a big deal, guys, because, again, at that point, even in Sargon's time, which was much before Hammurabi's time, you saw this vast empire, this large amount of land, and they were all under one king, but each state or each city-state would still have like their own separate rules and laws. So if you traveled, you may, be under different laws depending on where you traveled. But if you were in the Babylonian Empire, if you were in here with Hammurabi on the scene, then you all knew that you followed the same law. And all the people in the empire are protected by the law. Now, the law does tell us a lot about Babylon and the life of the Babylonian people at that time, but it also influences us in our present-day life, because the Code of Hammurabi was the first time that a leader came up and said that as part of the law, you had to provide evidence to accuse somebody of a crime. And until you could provide evidence, then that person is going to be innocent. So innocent until proven guilty. Those are two principles that's still here in our present-day law, and they come from Hammurabi's code. When people wrote our law, they had studied Hammurabi. And so you have to have evidence to accuse somebody of a crime. People are innocent until proven guilty. You should protect the weak by having laws. And then the other principle is that the punishment fits or matches the crime. So for example, if I steal somebody's food, then my food will be stolen from me. Or if somebody kills my brother, then their brother will be killed in turn. It's kind of that idea. You may have heard the phrase before, an eye for an eye. This is where it comes from. That is, a principle of Hammurabi's code, is the punishment will match the crime. So that's the end of lesson 12. Thank you for listening. You can pause here and complete lesson 12 for today, and then tomorrow you can watch this video again and fast forward to lesson 13. Thanks, guys. All right, so lesson 13, after Hammurabi's time, again, that Code of Hammurabi was very important, very influential. After his time, we're going to see some we're going to see the Babylonian Empire flourish under many different kings, and eventually one king is going to come on the scene, and his name is Nebuchadnezzar, and that's who we're going to talk about next. Now, Nebuchadnezzar did not come immediately after Hammurabi. After Hammurabi's rule, there were about 1,000 years in which the city of Babylon grew, the empire expanded, and of course, in 1,000 years, you're going to have a lot of different rulers. So we're kind of jumping a major time gap here. But eventually a new king does come in, and his name is Nebuchadnezzar. That's quite a mouthful. And he is going to rebuild Babylon and kind of create, he's going to, expand the empire, of course, but the capital of the Babylonian Empire is, of course, Babylon. And he's really going to rebuild the city, make it beautiful, make it rich looking, and make it very impressive. So that's what he did. He rebuilt the city as the capital of the empire. He included huge towers and walls and gates and palaces, and they were all adorned with like beautiful artwork. I mean, he wanted to make the city of Babylon look very rich and look very impressive, and that's what he did. And also, he utilized the benefits of the Euphrates River, and also helped to create some wealth for Babylon through that. Because if we're looking at Babylon here at the map, you see right there's the little dot. It's along the Euphrates River, and remember, anytime we talk about rivers, especially in this area, we're going to see that any city, any civilization, any empire built along a river is going to have some benefits, because rivers allow for trade, they help with farming, they help with transportation quickly. Without the river, they're not going to be able to ship goods to places or receive goods to places or from places as quickly and as easily. And of course, being in such a dry climate, it's also going to help them because it's going to provide some much needed water. But again, just kind of going back to what we said earlier, did Nebuchadnezzar rule right after Hammurabi? The answer is no. It was about 1,000 years, so doing a major time jump. But when Nebuchadnezzar did come on the scene, he was a very determined and ruthless warrior. I mean, he was known for fighting to expand his empire, because I mean, here you can kind of see the empire has grown quite a bit. So he fought to expand the empire. At one point, he even fought against one city. They were under siege for like 13 years. I mean, it was pretty intense as a warrior. And in total, he reigned for about 43 years himself. So that's quite a long time. And then he grew the Babylonian Empire. But when we talk about his contributions, we mostly think of him as a builder. So yes, he was an empire builder, but we're talking about a literal builder. He ordered the building of great city walls in Babylon, moats, bridges, 9 gates that led into the city, beautiful temples, beautiful towers. He ordered the building of all that because, again, he wanted to make Babylon a very ornate and important and beautiful and impressive city. Now here are some of the accomplishments or some of the buildings or things that he built. So first, when you came to Babylon, again, they had a huge wall built around the city, and in that wall there were only 9 gates. So there was only 9 different places where you could get into the city. Now the most important gate was called Ishtar's Gate, and if you recall from the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Sumerian epic poem that we talked about last week, if you recall, it was based on, or it included the goddess Ishtar, who is the goddess of love and war. What he wanted to do was, anytime he built something, he wanted to honor the gods by building it. And so basically we have this large gate, very ornate, very beautiful. They called it Ishtar's Gate because it was built in honor of Ishtar. Now as you pass through this gate, you're going to walk up a very long street called Processional Way, and if you look on either side of this street, you're going to see beautiful sights, temples such as the Temple of Marduk, towers such as the Tower of Babel, very beautiful scenery that you're going to see. So he built all of this because he wanted to make, again, Babylon, he just wanted to make it a very influential and important city. So if anybody who was from a different area came in, they could see the wealth, the power, and the impressiveness of the Babylonian Empire. Now, his most famous accomplishment is called the Hanging Gardens. So this is what we're going to talk about next. The Hanging Gardens are actually considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. They are not still around today where you can see them, but at the time they were a very impressive feat of engineering, and we're going to look at more about why. So remember that we had this city, Babylon, on the edge of the Euphrates River. And what happened at the time was that Nebuchadnezzar had a young wife, and he felt very despondent because his young wife was homesick a lot. So the legend says that he built the Hanging Gardens with her in mind because she was homesick a lot. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to provide a temple full of beautiful scenery, gardens, things like that, to make her feel more at home. But consider that, again, they're in the desert. How do you, and that's one factor that plays into play here. But also consider that if she wanted a big, beautiful, and ornate garden, but then you want it in the middle of a city, how are you going to make space? So what he did is he decided that they were going to build kind of a temple, a stepped-up temple, and that way that you could have many different gardens in a small amount of space. So that's why they're called the Hanging Gardens. And the Euphrates River was kind of pumped up to provide water to water these plants, but basically you had this huge temple building emerging from the Euphrates River, filled with beautiful plants from far off places, made it kind of gorgeous scenery, and it was called the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So very impressive. They also had to bring rock from out of Babylon because at this time, most buildings in Babylon were kind of made out of mud bricks and things like that. So the rock that was used to build these buildings was very scarce. They had to kind of bring it in from other areas. But this was the greatest feat of engineering at this time. Nebuchadnezzar, built it with his wife in mind, but it did withstand for quite a few years after they went away because it was such a great architectural accomplishment, you could say. And again, it is now considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, meaning you cannot see it to this day. It's no longer around, but we still consider it one of those great wonders. So again, one of his greatest feats is going to be the Hanging Gardens. So that is the end of lesson 13. And so at this point you can pause, and if you'd like to access lesson 14 tomorrow, then you may. Now lesson 14 is just going to be a unit review. There's not going to be much to go over on this presentation, but as you can see, we're going to be preparing for a test that's next week. So here's a few things that you should consider as you're preparing for your test. Make sure you complete the online review module, so that's the lesson 3.14 online. Access the study guide and begin completing it. Only use your textbook to do that though, because like I said earlier in the beginning of this video, if you use the internet, please believe me guys, you're going to get some crazy answers that are not going to help you prepare for the test. The only answers that are going to help you are the ones that come from the book, because the book is where the test is created from. Okay, so only use your book. Page numbers are going to be listed at the beginning of this presentation. I put a slide at the beginning of this video. Page numbers are listed there. And make sure you also attend a review session. So next Monday if you have my class, or next Tuesday if you have my class, we will review in class. So it's okay if you want to delay your testing time until you have come to one of those sessions. That's perfectly fine. But do not take the test until you come to review, completed the study guide, studied the study guide, and then ask me any questions that you have. Remember, I am going to be in live help all next week, and I'm available here for email if you have questions. But that is all that I have. So that is lesson 11 through 14 of Unit 3, and I hope you all have a great week.